I never believed love could begin in a YouTube comment section. But that's where he found me when I was broken, unseen, and ready to quit. I never expected my heart to unravel on a screen. Not in a world of thumbnails, likes, and mindless scrolls. But there I was staring blankly at my 10th video upload, the view count crawling like it was afraid of being seen. 37 views, 2 likes. One of them was from me. The rest of my apartment was dead silent, except for the occasional creak of my old fan rotating like it was sighing in exhaustion too. I slouched deeper into the couch, knees pulled to my chest, my hoodie sleeves stretched over my hands like some flimsy kind of armor. I used to think that creating content, putting your thoughts out into the world was brave. But now it's just felt like screaming into an abyss. I whispered to no one in particular, maybe I should just stop. My name's Lana, 24. Technically a YouTuber, though I hated that word lately. I didn't start making videos to be famous. I started because I couldn't say certain things out loud to people, to friends, even to myself. The camera became my confessional, and people, they used to listen, especially him. But now the silence was louder than anything. The heartbreak hadn't really gone away either, even after 9 months. Funny how long grief can linger for something that was supposed to be love. Kai was my first real relationship. 3 years together, thousands of photos, hundreds of laughs, and then one lie, one woman, one confession, and everything shattered. I tried healing the only way I knew how, I turning pain into poetry. So I started making short poetic monologues. Soft music in the background, close-up shots of candles, shadows, city lights. Just my voice, sometimes breaking, sometimes whispering, sometimes furious. It was raw. And at first, people connected, but that was months ago. Now it felt like everyone had moved on, except me. I stared at the latest video title, Midnight Thoughts I Shouldn't Still Be Having. And for a second, I hovered my finger over the delete button. My stomach twisted. What's the point of being honest when it feels like no one's listening? I closed the tab and dropped my head into my hands. That night, I didn't eat. I didn't text anyone. I just wrapped myself in a blanket burrito and fell asleep with the soft glow of the screen painting blue shadows across the wall. Until 3:02 a.m. when I woke up, checked my notifications out of sheer habit and saw it. A comment on that very video. It wasn't short. It wasn't spam. It wasn't a bot or a troll or a mindless emoji. It was. Sometimes the thoughts that come at midnight are the truest parts of us. You may feel alone, but your words make strangers feel less so. Keep whispering. Someone's listening. BluePhoenix. I stared at it, reread it, and then again. There was something about the way it was worded, the way it felt seen, like whoever wrote it didn't just watch my video, they understood it, like they understood me. I clicked on their profile. No picture, no videos, just a username, BluePhoenix.no bio. No links, no clues, just a single subscriber. And that comment. For the first time in months, I smiled. It was tiny, barely there, but it was real. I didn't reply right away. I stared at the screen, rereading the comment like it was a warm cup of tea I didn't want to finish too quickly. Then, finally, my fingers hovered over the keyboard, and I typed, "Thank you, BluePhoenix. Midnight is quieter with company." I didn't know anyone was still listening. Click. Send. It was out there, a reply, a thank you, An invisible thread forming between two strangers in the quietest hour of the night. I didn't know it yet, but that comment would be the first domino, and I would fall. Slowly, anonymously, and maybe beautifully. The next morning I woke up with my phone pressed against my cheek and a slight cramp in my neck from sleeping on the couch again. The sunlight had already started pouring in through the blinds, streaking across the floor like soft reminders that life was still going on. Even if I wasn't groggy, half asleep, I grabbed my phone out of instinct. No texts, no missed calls. Just one little notification bubbled, linking from YouTube. BluePhoenix replied, "My heart skipped. It was ridiculous how quickly a message from someone I didn't know could send a tiny jolt through my chest. But I wasn't used to being seen anymore. Not like that. Not after months of talking into a void and hearing nothing back." I tapped the notification, and the message loaded slowly, like it knew I needed the suspense. "I listen because you say what others are afraid to. You put loneliness into words and somehow make it feel less terrifying. Don't stop. Midnight needs a voice." My lips parted in a silent breath. It wasn't just a compliment. It wasn't performative. It felt like care. Real, unfiltered care from someone I couldn't even picture in my mind. I replied before I could second-guess myself. Funny. I've always thought if loneliness could talk, it would sound like silence. Maybe we've both been wrong. Or maybe silence just needed subtitles. Almost immediately, a response came through. Or maybe it needed a narrator. "Yours has become my favorite." I laughed. Really laughed. Not the forced kind you do when you're trying to convince yourself you're okay, but the kind that bubbles up because something inside you feels touched. That whole day I kept checking my notifications, like a teenager with a new crush. But it didn't feel childish. It felt warm, safe. BluePhoenix and I kept replying in the thread, one comment after another. Every time I uploaded something new, they'd be the first to react. But not in a generic, nice video way. No, he dissected the lines, quoted his favorite phrases, and left thoughtful reflections of his own. Soon the comments became long enough to be letters, and I began to write. For him, I'd never admit it out loud, but when I was filming my next video, I imagined him watching it. I imagined him reading between the lines of my voice, trying to find meaning. And I made sure there was something there for him to find. It was strange how someone without a face could feel more real than most people in my life. Soon, our YouTube comment shifted to something deeper. He left an email in a reply. "Only if you're comfortable. No pressure. But words like yours deserve more than 500 characters. And somehow, I was. I created a burner Gmail just to be cautious, and sent a short message that night. To the stranger who keeps my midnight company. Hi. I guess we're pen pals now. He replied with a poem. Short, simple, beautiful. We are two quiet souls in different cities, passing letters in bottles on a digital sea. No names, no photos, no pressure to be anything but honest. And I think that's rare. It was signed. Simply, B.P. I must read it 10 times before responding. No one had written poetry for me before, let alone someone who didn't want anything in return, not my body, not my time, not even a name, just words, presence. We kept emailing, one message a night, always around midnight. We talked about everything: books, songs, fears, favorite rainy day snacks, how heartbreak still makes the air feel heavier, and how sometimes the silence in your own apartment is the loudest thing of all. We never shared personal details. No real names. No photos. It was the most emotionally intimate thing I'd ever experienced. I didn't know his age, or job, or what city he lived in. Just his rhythm, his way of phrasing things, the patterns in his speech, the way he quoted obscure poets and wrote like he was trying to stitch up the parts of me I thought were beyond repair. There was a moment, one night, when I almost broke the rule. I hovered over the keyboard and typed, "I think I'm starting to feel something for you." Is that crazy? But I deleted it, because it was crazy. Right, was it? I didn't know anymore. All I knew was every night I waited for his message like it was medicine. And when it arrived, I read it like scripture. He wrote one line that I still remember to this day. "I don't need to know your face to know your soul." That night, I cried, not out of sadness, but because someone had finally looked at me not through a lens, not through expectations, but through the quiet ache of who I really was. The nights started feeling shorter, not because I was sleeping better, if anything, I was sleeping less. But for once, it wasn't insomnia that kept me up. It was anticipation. A quiet thrill. Every midnight, without fail, there was a message. From BluePhoenix. Sometimes it was a short verse, other times it was a full-blown letter. But no matter what it contained, it always began the same way: "To the girl who gave silence a voice." And I, who once dreaded the emptiness of my inbox, now rushed to check it before brushing my teeth or even turning on the lights. Our messages became a ritual. Coffee in the morning, BluePhoenix at night. We began sharing playlist songs that made us feel understood. Songs that hurt too beautifully to play just once. Songs I hadn't listened to since Kai left, because they reminded me of a time I no longer trusted. But now, music felt safe again. He sent me one track that made me cry in the middle of folding laundry. It was called "Like Strangers Do," and the lyrics haunted me. I replied that night with just one sentence: "That song made me miss someone I've never even met." His response was simple: "Me too." Sometimes we talked about the mundane. What we were reading, the weather in our cities, though we still didn't name them. He said he liked thunderstorms. I told him I hated them unless someone was with me. He replied, "Then I'll be the sound in your inbox when the sky breaks open." Who was this man? This faceless soul who stitched words so gently into the torn parts of my day? I started writing more, not just for YouTube, but for myself. Journals filled up again. Notebooks I hadn't touched in months were pulled from drawers, like old friends returning from exile. And with every video I posted, his comments followed. Always thoughtful, always specific, always watching, but never pressuring. I started to feel radiant. Not in a physical way, God knows I hadn't dressed up in weeks, but in that strange, sacred way when someone finally makes you feel like your thoughts matter. Like you matter. But there were rules we both followed, unspoken yet strict. No names. No social media. No phone numbers. Just emails. Just midnight. Sometimes I wanted to break them. To ask, "What are you hiding?" Or more truthfully, "Why am I?" Because in all of this growing closeness, I realized I wasn't being fully honest either. I hadn't told him about Kai, or about the panic attacks, or about how sometimes I posted videos and deleted them minutes later because the vulnerability felt too raw. But somehow, despite all that, BluePhoenix saw through it anyway. He'd write things like, "Your voice sounded softer this time. Did you sleep better? Or were you pretending again?" And I'd just stare at the screen, shaken by how well a stranger could know me through nothing but a 5-minute video. and a handful of midnight letters. One evening, after filming something especially emotional, I sat at the desk, candle flickering low, and I typed, "I want to ask what your name is. I want to know your favorite book, your worst memory, and what you'd look like holding a mug in the morning sun. But I also don't want to break this beautiful, word-wrapped, careful thing we've built. So maybe, don't tell me. Just keep writing," he replied within minutes. "I don't think I've ever wanted to be someone more than. I want to be the version of me you imagine when you write." And in that moment I knew I was in love, not with a face, not with a history, but with a mind, a presence, a consistent, tender silence filler who somehow made me feel braver than anyone else ever had. And yet, I was terrified. What if he wasn't real? What if he was everything I feared, that when revealed, the magic would vanish, replaced by awkward silence and unmet expectations? What if I wasn't who he imagined either? What if our words were better than we ever could be? Still, the heart doesn't follow logic. It follows rhythm, and mine was now sinking to the beat of BluePhoenix's keystrokes. Days turned into weeks, weeks into months, and our midnight emails turned into lifelines. I didn't even notice when my world started orbiting around them. But it did, subtly, sweetly, like sunlight creeping across your bed in the morning. You don't realize you're bathing in it until everything around you is warm. My videos grew better, not in quality, necessarily, but in heart. I wasn't just talking to a lens anymore. I was talking to him. Sometimes I'd pause mid-recording and think, would he smile at this line? Would this sentence reach him the way I hope it does? And I noticed something wild. The view count started rising, not dramatically, but slowly, steadily. My comments section filled up with people saying things like, "Your voice helps me sleep," or "You say what I'm scared to say out loud." Somewhere along the way, I found a rhythm, but only he knew what pulsed beneath it. One night, after uploading a piece called "Things I'd Say If I Didn't Overthink Everything," I received an email that wasn't poetic, wasn't carefully crafted, just raw. "You sound tired tonight." Not in the sleepy way, in the heavy way. "Do you want to talk?" No poetry, just truth. I stared at the message, and I broke. Tears spilled before I even realized what was happening. I typed, and typed, and typed. I told him everything about Kai, about how the relationship had chipped away at me until I barely recognized who I was. How I started making videos to feel in control again. How it only worked until I started feeling like even my truth wasn't enough anymore, and how the silence, the waiting, the lingering memories still haunted me, even when I pretended they didn't. I hesitated before hitting send, but something in me knew if there was one person who wouldn't flinch at the mess, it was him. His reply didn't come until 2 hours later, but it was worth the wait. "You are not unlovable because you were once unloved well. You are not broken because someone else lacked the hands to hold you right." Pain may be part of your story, but it doesn't get to write the ending. And then, I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I cried again, but this time, it felt good, cleansing. I imagined his fingers hovering over his keyboard somewhere, maybe miles away, maybe states away, just typing carefully, gently, as if my soul was fragile glass. And somehow, his hands always knew exactly how to hold it. We didn't need photos, or BOS, or perfect lighting. We had words, and they were enough. Sometimes we emailed playlists with captions like "Play this when the world feels too loud" or "This one reminded me of your laugh in your last video." And sometimes we said nothing at all, just sent a single line like "You survived another day. I'm proud of you." And I would reply, "You too." Even if you don't say it, I know some days are hard for you. There were moments I wondered, was I romanticizing this? Was I building someone out of pixels and imagination? But then I'd read his words again, and remember, realness doesn't need a face. Sometimes souls recognize each other before bodies do. Still, no matter how deep we dived, we stayed in our digital comfort zone. We never asked for more, not even once, until he did. The email came unexpectedly. A short subject line, "Can I ask you something?" I clicked it faster than I should have, my heart already preparing itself to hear something I wasn't sure I was ready for. Inside, it was just 4 sentences. "I've never done this before, but I think I've fallen for you. Not in the way that's careless or sudden, but in the slow, certain way that feels like home. Would you ever want to meet in real life?" I stared at the screen, my throat tightened, my stomach flipped, and I didn't know what to do. For all the hours I'd spent wondering who he was, for all the times I fantasized about what meeting might feel like. Now that it was real, now that he'd said it, I was terrified. I closed my laptop. I didn't reply, not that night, not the next day either, because even though my heart was screaming yes, my fears were louder. What if meeting changed everything? What if the magic dissolved? What if the version of me he fell for in these midnight letters, this thoughtful, composed voice online, wasn't who I was in real life? Because in real life, I was awkward. I overthought everything. I had panic attacks in grocery store aisles and sometimes cried while brushing my teeth because the world just felt too heavy. I was real, and that terrified me. What if he didn't love real? The digital version of us was perfect, untouched, unpressured. We didn't have to navigate real-world messes or awkward silences or mismatched timing. But then again, weren't those the things love was supposed to weather? I opened a new document, stared at the blinking cursor for 10 minutes. Then I wrote, "I've read your message more times than I can admit. I want to say yes. I do say yes. But I need time. Not because I don't care, but because this matters more than anything has in a long time. I'm scared of ruining it, of being too much or not enough. But I want to meet you. That's the truth. So, yes, let's meet." I sat with it, then clicked send. No takebacks. A minute later, I received, "I understand. Take your time. I'm not going anywhere. Whenever you're ready, I'll be waiting." No pressure, just patience. And that more than anything made me feel safe. We picked a date. 2 weeks later, neutral ground. A little CAF downtown, halfway between both our cities. Neither of us had been there before. No expectations. Just a simple meeting. We still hadn't exchanged photos or full names, just descriptions. I'd wear a mustard yellow sweater. He'd carry a book with a blue cover and a pressed flower inside. We agreed. No expectations. If it didn't feel right, we could walk away. No pressure. But inside, I was trembling, because even though I'd never seen him, I was already in love. And love, when real, is always a little bit terrifying. The day arrived like thunder, loud, sudden and impossible to ignore. I woke up feeling everything at once, excited, nauseous, overjoyed, terrified. I had barely slept. tossing and turning until dawn painted the sky with the kind of golden nervousness only new beginnings bring. I dressed slowly, hands trembling, mustard yellow sweater just like we agreed. Hair down, but not too styled. Natural, like me. I looked in the mirror and whispered, "This is just a coffee date. Just a stranger. Just the person who knows you better than anyone else on this planet." That last part hit too hard. My stomach knotted again. I got there 20 minutes early. I couldn't help it. I needed to see the space, read the air, find the exits just in case I needed to bolt. It was a quiet CAF tucked between a bookstore and a florist. The kind of place where the floors creaked and everything smelled like cinnamon and roasted beans. I chose a small table in the corner, close enough to the window for light, but far enough from the entrance to observe. My hands were sweaty. My heart raced. Would I even recognize him? Would he recognize me? Would we feel the same when we weren't protected by timestamps and glowing screens? Then the door opened. A man stepped in, taller than I imagined. Dark jacket, blue book in hand. My breath caught. Was this him? He glanced around. Then his eyes found mine. He smiled, and my entire body froze, because I knew that smile. I had known it for years, but not in this story, not from these letters. It was Kai, my ex, the man who had broken me, left me, and watched my world collapse without flinching. My vision blurred for a second. He walked toward me, unsure, hesitant, holding a book, a blue book. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. Kai stopped at my table and said, "Lana." His voice was cautious, not cruel, not smug, just unfamiliar. "Now, what are you doing here?" I finally choked out. He held up the book. "I saw one of your videos in my feed last month. Couldn't stop watching. The poetry, the voice, it was you, but different, stronger." I started following quietly. Then I saw the comments and your replies, and something told me. My mind was racing. I interrupted, trying to control the shaking in my voice. "You're not BluePhoenix." "No," he said quickly. "God, no, I wanted to see you, to say sorry for everything." I swallowed hard. This was not the meeting I had prepared for. I didn't know what to feel. And then behind him, I saw movement. Someone else had walked in. Softer presence. Quieter. He wasn't tall or imposing, just familiar in a way I couldn't explain. His eyes scanned the room like he wasn't sure he belonged. He had dot in his hands. A blue book. But not just any book. My book. The self-published poetry chapbook I had released before Kai and I ended. Only a few copies had sold. Barely anyone knew about it. My eyes locked onto the cover, and then onto him. Not Kai, not anyone I knew. But I knew that was him. BluePhoenix. He saw me and stopped, still, like his entire body had forgotten how to move. I stood up. Slowly, Kai turned to see what I was looking at, and as our eyes met across the CAF floor, something quiet and overwhelming passed between us. Recognition, fear, hope, and something else, relief. He started walking toward me, each step filled with hesitation, like approaching a deer that might spook. I met him halfway. My voice barely worked. "You came?" He nodded, eyes never leaving mine. "So did you." There was a long pause. Then he smiled, gently. "Hi." And I whispered back, heart cracking wide open, "Hi." Time slowed to a hush. The kind of quiet that feels like snowfall, soft, heavy, reverent. I stood there, heart in my throat, face to face with the stranger who somehow knew me more intimately than anyone ever had, and yet I didn't even know his name. He looked nervous, not the kind of nervous that meant doubt, but the kind that meant this moment mattered. He glanced at the book in his hand, and then back at me. I almost turned around when I saw him talking to you. I followed his gaze. Kai had returned to his seat, watching us with an unreadable expression. I whispered, "I didn't know he'd be here." He nodded. I figured. But for a second, I thought I was too late. The vulnerability in his voice undid me. I took a deep breath and stepped closer. "You're not." Silence. But the good kind. The kind that holds a million unsaid words. Then, finally, I asked, "Can I know your name now?" He smiled small, uncertain. "Adrian." It fit. I don't know why, but it did. "Adrian," I repeated. "I like it. Do I look like how you imagined?" he asked. I laughed softly. "Not at all." His face fell slightly, and I quickly added, "But that's not a bad thing." I didn't fall for a picture. I fell for a presence. "You feel like you," he seemed to exhale for the first time since entering the CAF. "Can we sit?" he asked. We found a quiet table near the back, away from Kai, away from everything else. For a long moment, we just looked at each other, really looked, and that's when I noticed it. Adrian's eyes kind, warm, but tired. The tiredness wasn't physical. It was deeper. Like he'd spent his whole life hiding behind screens, because the world outside had never been safe enough for someone like him. "Why didn't you ever want to share a photo?" I asked gently. He hesitated, then answered truthfully, "I've always been good with words. But the real world, not so much. I have anxiety. Pretty intense sometimes. Social situations are hard. Photos make me self-conscious. But with you, I wanted to be honest without fear." I nodded slowly, my chest aching in the best and worst way. "I get that," I said. I hide behind my voice. My videos. I sound confident, but most days, I'm still piecing myself back together. He looked at me like he saw every hidden scar. "Then maybe we don't have to hide anymore," I smiled. "Maybe not." There was something profound in that moment. Two imperfect people. No masks. No filters. No performances. Just presence. He reached into the book he carried and pulled out something carefully flattened between the pages, a delicate pressed flower. Blue. Frail. Still. Beautiful. "I thought this might die on the way," he said, offering it to me. I took it like a sacred gift. "You remembered," I whispered. "I said I liked wildflowers in one of my old videos. You said they felt like rebellion." "Beauty without permission," he replied. I blinked back. No one had ever remembered the quiet things, not like this. Adrian looked down, nervous again. "Is this okay? Me being here? All of this?" "Yes," I said softly. "It's more than okay." He finally exhaled fully. Then, after a long pause, said the words I hadn't realized I needed to hear. "You weren't just a voice in the dark, Lana. You were the light. And even if this is all we ever get, this one coffee, this one afternoon, I'm glad I found you. Even if it was only through words." My hand reached for his across the table before I could stop it, and he didn't pull away. We just sat there, two strangers, two stories, finally no longer alone. If life were a movie, that CAF would faded into golden light, soft music rising, and the screen slowly dimming to black. But this wasn't a movie. This was real, and real was never simple. Just when I thought things had found their rhythm, just when Adrian and I was slipping into something steady, unspoken, and warm. A sudden voice broke through. Lana. I turned. Ty stood by our table. His expression wasn't angry. Was curious. Guarded. Wounded. Can we talk? He asked. Adrian instinctively withdrew his hand from mine. My stomach twisted. I looked at Adrian first. He gave me the smallest nod. Brave but unsure, I stood and followed Kai to a small corner of the CAF, near the wall of ivy-covered windows. He crossed his arms. So, was that your mysterious pen pal? I blinked. How do you know about that? Kai gave a small, humorless laugh. You used to write about him on your blog. You didn't use his name, but I remember. I read everything you wrote back then, even the things you thought no one noticed. That stopped me. You. What? I wasn't blind, Lana. I just didn't know how to reach you. And when I finally tried, you were already halfway gone. My breath caught. You were the one who walked away. I know. And I regretted it. He looked back toward the table where Adrian sat, nervously pretending not to listen. You've moved on, Kai said. But I need to say something before it's too late. I waited. I came back not just to visit. I came back for you. I thought maybe we still had a chance. The floor seemed to shift beneath me. Of all the times, of all the confessions, Kai, I said gently, I think part of me waited for you to say that. For a long time, his eyes brightened. For a second. But not anymore, I continued. I'm not that girl anymore. He flinched but nodded. I had to try, he whispered. I needed to know. And now you do. I replied. He lingered for another heartbeat, then stepped away. A quiet surrender. I stood there, frozen for a second, caught between a past that had finally let go and a present that was holding its breath. Then I turned back toward the table. Adrian looked up as I approached, half ready to say he understood if I needed to leave. But I didn't sit back down. Instead, I walked around the table and stood in front of him. Then, slowly, I reached out my hand. Come with me. His brows lifted in surprise. Where? Someplace without ghosts, I said with a smile. Let's rewrite our own beginning. He hesitated for half a second. Then he stood, his hand slipping into mine. Warm, steady, real, as we stepped out into the late afternoon light, I realized something quietly monumental. This wasn't the climax. It wasn't the big dramatic kiss or the sweeping music. This was the start, not of a fairy tale, but of something better, honest, and alive. And as the sun dipped behind the skyline, painting us in a glow of gold and amber, I whispered to the wind, I think I'm finally ready. Adrian squeezed my hand gently. So am I. There's this funny thing about falling in love, not the crush kind, not the movie kind, but the kind that seeps into your everyday until it's just there. Like how Adrian always brewed 2 cups of tea even if he wasn't sure I'd show up. Or how I learned he always left a small note tucked behind the sugar jar, a single line, a quote, or I hope today's soft on you. These weren't grand gestures. They were footprints in the sand, small and quiet, but steady. Weeks passed, and the rhythm of us became almost second nature. We weren't official, whatever that meant. There were no labels or declarations, but we were something undeniable. I started writing again, really writing, not just drafts no one would see. I shared stories again, even ones that felt too soft or too strange, and Adrian? He showed me his sketches, the ones he hid in the back of his closet, afraid they weren't good enough. They were brilliant, not perfect, but honest. We'd sit for hours, sketching, writing, sharing songs, trading childhood secrets like cards at a lunch table. And one night, it happened. Not an explosion, not fireworks, but a quiet shift. It was raining, the kind of steady drizzle that made the city glow beneath street lamps. We sat in his apartment, wrapped in a shared blanket, a half-eaten pizza on the coffee table. I looked at him mid-laugh. Something in me just clicked. "I like you," I blurted, barely above a whisper. He froze, then smiled soft and certain. "I was waiting for you to say it first." I blinked. "You were. Every day since we met again," he said. "But I didn't want to push. I wanted you to be ready." I leaned in, then closer than we'd ever been. Our foreheads touched. I could feel his breath, hear his heartbeat, see the small scar near his brow I'd never noticed before. "You have terrible taste in tea," I said. He grinned. "And you hoard socks. They're warm." "They're everywhere." We laughed. Then silence. Then a kiss. Soft, unrushed, like turning the first page of a book you already know you'll love. It wasn't the kind of kiss that changes the world, just the kind that makes it feel safe again. And when we pulled apart, Adrian looked at me like I was the only story he'd ever wanted to read. "I'm all in, Lana," he said. And for the first time in forever, I didn't feel scared to believe it. The days that followed felt like waking up from a long, heavy sleep. For the first time in years, I didn't carry the weight of what if in my chest. Instead, there was something new, a quiet, steady hope. Adrian and I settled into a life filled with small, imperfect moments. Lazy Sunday mornings with burnt coffee, midnight talks about fears and dreams, shared playlists that became our soundtrack. One evening, inspired by everything that had happened, I decided to make a new video, not about heartbreak, not about loneliness, but about love, real love, the kind that starts in silence. In understanding. In choosing to see someone flaws, scars and all, and deciding they're worth the risk. I filmed in my room, the soft glow of fairy lights behind me, holding the poetry book Adrian had given me, the one with the pressed blue flower, and I spoke, voice steady and sure, to the one who loved me in silence, to the stranger who became my home. Thank you for finding me when I was lost, for showing me that love doesn't need a face to be real, that sometimes the truest connections are the ones we build with words, patience, and courage. This is our story, imperfect, unexpected, and beautifully ours. I titled the video, "To the One Who Loved Me in Silence." When I uploaded it, I felt a flutter of nerves, old ghosts whispering doubts, but then the comments started pouring in. People shared their own stories of quiet love, of healing, of finding light in unexpected places. And in that moment, I realized love isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a whisper, a hand held in the dark, a promise made without words. Adrian held my hand as the views climbed. His smile was the best kind of validation, not just because people watched, but because they understood, because we had been understood. We didn't need perfect beginnings. We only needed honesty and the courage to choose love every single day. Sometimes love begins in silence, in typed words, in paused breaths, in unspoken hope. He loved me in the comments, but in real life, I chose to love him back. Thanks for watching. Hoped you liked it. Before leaving, please hit the subscribe button, comment your thought, and share with your nearest and dearest one. See you in the next one. Until to the next one, spread love.